Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Committee meeting. It's now 6 o'clock, and I would like to start the meeting. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Councillor Fletcher, and I'll be the chair for this meeting tonight. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. And just to sort of make it clear in case it appears a little odd, we'll be starting with the agenda items for last month's meeting, the one that was carried over, and we'll then move on to the agenda for tonight. Okay, so we'll go through September first and then kick off October. Item 1 on the agenda for this is. You'll have to pretend we're in September at the minute. So item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Arnold and Councillor Shinnick. I don't think anybody else is actually absent, are they? So, no other apologies. No other need for apologies. Nobody else missing. Okay, thank you. Carly, any?
No further apologies.
No, right. I guess we can carry those two over to the October. Item 2 on the agenda, minutes. So I would like to move that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 8th of August, if you can remember that far back, be approved as a correct record. Any comments or agreed? Lovely, thank you very much. Right, item number 3, items of urgent business. I have not received or approved any items of urgent business. Which takes on to item 4 on the agenda, and this is declarations of interest. This is as regards the one item on the September meeting. So are there any interests that anybody would like to declare before we carry on? No? Lovely, thank you. And item 5 on the agenda, declarations of receipts. This is any correspondence or meetings, correspondence received or meetings held. Anything anybody would like to raise or share? No?
We all got the correspondence, didn't we, from the crematorium? And you politely replied to that, didn't you? Yeah, yes. So, yeah, there's been correspondence there. Yeah.
So apart from that, we've, and they will be speaking tonight, but apart from that, we've not had anything that's of relevance to that. Okay, lovely. Now, item 6 on the agenda is planning appeals. So Jonathan Keane, may I ask you to present, please?
Thank you, Chair. The report is for noting, but happy to take any questions if needed.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that you've had a read through the report. Any questions from anybody for Jonathan? No. Sorry, I'll leave you a second or so to get through to the right bit of it. It's quite a... We're looking at the September item for the moment, so it's the thin one. Okay, so if there are no questions, then can I assume that we have noted the report? Thank you. Which brings us to agenda item 7 for September. And this is the cottage, Lower Dunton Road, Bulven, Essex, pages 23 to 32 on your agenda. Jonathan, could I ask you to present the report for that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, this application refers to a semi-detached property, a semi-detached cottage on the west side of Lower Dunton Road. The site plan on the screen shows the cottage is on the southern side of the pair of two, and the application site here on the aerial photo is marked in red, and the site lies in the green belt. There's a photo here of the rear of the property, which shows the original form would have a pitched roof running side to side at the front and a projecting element at the back, which would be 2 stories. So the property has been extended in the past with a flat roof extension to the rear. That's another photo from the side elevation showing the flank southern elevation of the property. So the existing plans show the ground floor and the first floor, and then there's the existing rear extension, which is a flat roof to the back of the property. The proposed plans here show a show a first floor extension to the rear of the property, so widening the existing first floor element, and a two-storey side extension to the bottom of the screen. This is at the side of the property and extends at ground floor and first floor. Within the green belt, extensions to dwellings should be proportionate to the original dwelling, a floor space equivalent to 2 reasonably sized rooms. The 2 reasonable sized room allowance for this property would be 19.4 square metres, and the proposal before you tonight would see an overall increase to the dwelling of 36.4 square metres, almost double the amount allowed by policy PMD6. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy PMD6 and is inappropriate development in the green belt and is also harmful to the openness of the green belt. The very special circumstances that have been put forward are outlined on page 29 of the September agenda, but none of these circumstances, either singularly or collectively, would outweigh the harm to the green belt, and refusal is therefore recommended.
Thank you, Jonathan. Before we go back to Jonathan, I would like to ask Councillor Barry Johnson to come forward and make a statement. We've received a statement of support from Councillor Johnson, which can be found on page 3 of your speaker's booklet. After Councillor Johnson's spoken, I'll ask you to address any questions, any factual questions to him, and then we can come back to speaking to Jonathan about the overall presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to speak as ward councillor in favour of approving this application. The proposal is quite clear. It is simply seeking approval of a 2-storey side extension with a first floor rear extension, which the report at some point agrees is only slightly outside the 2 reasonably sized rooms. Whilst the property is a semi-detached dwelling, I do not believe the neighbour is in any way against the proposal, and considering the surrounding development pattern is considered sporadic, as per the report, I cannot see how this application would cause any harm to the greenbelt, let alone further harm. The property is very old, and rather than sell up and leave Thurrock, the applicant is looking to bring the dwelling into the 21st century and make a forever home for their family. Whilst I sympathise with the need to follow policy, I know policy is there for a reason, I cannot help believe that the borough's planning department doesn't have greater problems in improving the local plan rather than spending time on applications which really amount to nothing more than home improvements, and should be looking to assist residents to remain in Thurrock in a dwelling that is fit for today's lifestyle. Apart from the attached dwelling, the property is very secluded with only farm buildings opposite, and any nearby residential dwellings, being of recent planning permission, are all for much larger properties. The committee are asked to look at the harm this application may do to the greenbelt, and as such requires the applicant to provide very special circumstances as to why it should be granted. Personally, I believe the applicant has done this in the application. However, as this is a committee decision, I would urge the committee to consider a site visit, as in my opinion, I believe that a look at the site and surrounding area might just make the committee question whether there is any harm to the greenbelt whatsoever. And rather than looking for the applicant to present special circumstances, to please provide evidence to the question, what is the harm in the greenbelt? So thank you for your time, but what I really think I'm trying to say is there must come a point, I know policy dictates, but there must come a point where we have to use our own common sense and look at these things and say, you know, this is a property we need to come into the 21st century, and is there really any harm to the greenbelt? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So before Councillor Johnson sits down, are there any factual questions you'd like to put to him? Councillor, just one thing that I'd like to check. I think you referenced the report as saying that the proposals are just outside. I believe that refers to an earlier proposal rather than this one. So I think I can check with, I think Jonathan can confirm that.
Yeah, the current figures, the floor space that would be allowed would be 19.4, and the floor space that's proposed is 36.4.
Thanks, Jonathan. So, Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, the only thing that bothered me was this is just a simple home improvement. I'd call home improvement like a bit of wallpapering. This is like a lot more than home improvement, isn't it? I think you're underplaying it a little bit too much.
Sorry, Councillor, was there a question in there? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Any other questions? Steve.
Sorry. When I read through the application earlier on, it suggested that the property had been purchased with the idea of developing it and making it larger, where I think what was just being suggested is that the occupants have been there for some long time. I don't know which is which, but the two things kind of were contrary, that was all.
I'm sure the residents are here. I'm sure they can tell you exactly how long they've lived there. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson, thanks very much for your statement, and you may resume your seat. Okay, so councillors, you've had the chance to read the report provided by Jonathan. So, do you have any questions? Oh, my apologies. Do we have another speaker? It's known as turning over the page and reading the other side. My apologies, Melanie. We have a statement of support from Melanie Pettigrew. Melanie, do we have a counter tonight, or? Excellent. So I think it's 3 minutes that we've allocated. You'll find that you've got two buttons on the thing in front of you. The right-hand button switches you on. On you go.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Deputy Chairman and committee members. My name is Melanie Pettigrew and I've lived at the cottage with my husband and 2 children since 2016. We purchased the cottage, an old farmer's cottage, for its locality, surroundings and the opportunity to develop this 3-bedroomed cottage into a family home, but still in the style that it was originally built. We understand that Greenbelt is in place to prevent urban spoil, urban expansion, and to protect the openness of the countryside. The scheme that we are seeking permission for today has been designed on the footprint already approved by the planners, thus resulting in a positive benefit to maintain the openness of the Greenbelt. From the planners' report, we feel they have no objection to the design of the extensions, but they have rejected the application due to a calculation that determines an extension of 2 reasonable size rooms can only be added to the original property. As it stands today, the cottage only has 4 livable rooms, not the 6 mentioned in their report. The bedroom at the rear is just big enough for a single bed and a bedside table. It certainly does not meet today's standards of accommodation, and you certainly cannot live in the original kitchen. It still has the old cooking fireplace. We feel that no consideration has been taken into account how small the original cottage was to begin with and the fact that it was originally built with an outside toilet and the home life has changed drastically over 100 years. The cottage was originally built as a 3-bedroomed home, and we would like to keep it that way, bringing it into the 21st century. We have tried over the last 4 years to work with the planners to come up with a scheme that is agreeable to all parties, and we feel that this is our last opportunity to gain permission to create a real family home of today's standards. We accept the planning department's role is to protect the openness of the countryside. However, it really does not seem fair that 3 new homes have just been given approval to be built down the end of the road, and yet we are unable to gain permission to update an old farmer's cottage that has been standing for over 100 years. And we urge the committee to approve this planning application. Thank you all so much for listening and allowing me the opportunity to speak to you this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Melanie. If you just like to,
That one?
that's it. If you press it again, it should go off.
No.
Oh, do you know what? Leave it on, because in case they ask any questions.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah, it's not going to make
I'll
any
put my glasses
major
on now, I can
difference.
see you all.
If it's not going to play, then we'll just ignore it. Councillors, do you have any questions for Melanie? Councillor Byrne.
So did you bought a quaint little cottage and then expecting to turn it into a house and not a cottage? Is that what we get from that?
No, what happened was, so we bought the cottage. Naively, I suppose, didn't realise what Greenbelt was all about, to be fair. Thought that we could just put an application in for an extension, and obviously it was turned down. So it wasn't naivety, I suppose you want to call it. If I'd have known it was going to be like this, we wouldn't have probably purchased it. But hey, we're here, and this is our last chance. That's okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Sisterson.
Sorry, just to be clear in my own mind. So you had a planning permission previously? Is that
Yes, so
right?
we originally had planning permission for an ensuite and extend one of the bedrooms so we could fit a bathroom upstairs.
Yeah, and that
But
was
we
allowed.
weren't able to extend the rear extension together. We weren't given, so we could either do one or the other, but we couldn't do both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions for Melanie? Okay. Melanie, thank you for your statement. And if you'd like to
Do you want to press the
try and find your way through that weird door thing. Ah, there we go. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So we've had 2 speakers. I've had the chance to question the speakers. I'd like to go back now to Jonathan's presentation. We'll give you a bit of time to ask Jonathan any questions, then we'll move on to debating the subject. So any questions for Jonathan? No? Short and sweet. Okay, so we'll move on to the debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I think, first of all, planning is difficult to negotiate. I think this evening it's an incredible agenda when you look at some of the things we're being asked to approve and refuse this evening. The first 2 are in the Greenbelt against officer recommendations. Uniquely, the third one in Aveley is a huge development in the Greenbelt, and we're being asked to approve it. And obviously, I think sometimes as councillors we get to look at applications a little bit more practical. What I mean is I understand how our officer, Mr. Keane, has come up with this recommendation because he's reading off the MPPPF. But when you actually look at what we're being asked to approve, it's really not too much. Every application is based on its own merits, and we do have previous a form in approving schemes like this in this area. We had Lower Dunton Road a couple of, it's probably about 18 months ago, Highview. I mean, that was a huge bungalow that we effectively gave approval to. We've also got, I think it was Orchard Cottage. Again, that was about 18 months ago. So ultimately, when you look at what we're being asked to approve, it's a very tiny extension compared to what we're being asked to approve a lot later on in the agenda. No one is complaining about this. I see no reason in why we shouldn't approve it. And in terms of these bedrooms, they are small. I don't like the idea that because it's an old cottage, you know, it's unreasonable to ask these people that they can't extend the size of these rooms. Yet if it was a new property, you simply would not be allowed to get away with rooms of that size. So all they're really trying to do is make the property they're in better. As mentioned, no one's complaining. I'm more than happy to lead approval. But if the rest of the committee want to reject it, then we can. That would be straightforward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Anybody else care to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, I'm going along the same lines as Councillor Kelly, really. I've sat on this committee, and we allowed the Red Row on the same road or the same vicinity anyway. And because what they offer 106 money, they're in a position to do it. We say yes. Applicant across the road at the same time. I remember we had 4 little houses. No, it's Greenbelt. This person, a little cottage, she's not going to be able to offer 106 money or a hospital or whatever. So there seems to be, we go for the big uns in that area because there's carrots being offered, and the little small people can't offer carrots, and all she wants is a little extension to raise her family. I can't see how we can reject this and put, how many houses was there, 100 houses on Red Row? I mean, we're 80. We're not consistent, are we? We give away big lumps, but we're not going to let the lady build a bedroom. So I'm Greenbelt, in favour of Greenbelt, not building on a Greenbelt, but in the shape of things, I think we've got to say yes.
Any further comments? Anybody else want to? I'll come back to you, Jonathan, in a sec, because I appreciate you might want to come back on a couple of points there. No? Okay, Jonathan, do you want to comment on any of the points made there by Councillor Byrne?
Just very briefly, I'm not quite sure which scheme you're talking about the 4 units, so I won't comment on that one. But the Red Rose scheme, that was shown in the 2013 site-specific allocations document as a potential site for housing and a hospice. So that was one of the reasons that was approved, and there were other very special circumstances with that case. So it wasn't because Section 106 package was offered. It was part of, at the time, a site that was put forward for housing and the hospice use. And just picking up on a general point, we don't have sort of bedroom standards for extensions for properties. There are potentially floor space standards for new dwellings, but it's not something we would have to retrofit to existing extensions. But that's obviously members' view if that's something they feel they want to run with.
Thanks, Jonathan. Councillor Byrne?
Can I just check up the Red Row one? Was that the one that offered the mini hospital?
With the hospice.
Yeah. I think my point's made.
Okay, one thing I would like to point out before we move on is that when deciding to approve or reject an application, we are asked to do so on its merits. So whilst it's certainly reasonable to point to other developments and say, well, is this consistent? We will be asked to make a decision that stands or falls on its own merits. That isn't asking you to vote one way or the other, but simply to say the decision you take should be on whether you feel this particular extension is reasonable or not. Okay. Any further? Oh, great. We have more customers.
Can I just ask what the chair thinks? I'm going to vote on consistency, so I will vote for it. I'm not voting on this application, so should I abstain? I'm not voting on Bill, I'm voting on what's happened in the past, and I think it's outrageous. Putting hospice, if this lady puts in hospice in her back garden, it'll go through, won't it?
Thanks, Gary. It's absolutely up to you how you want to vote and why. So please don't feel swayed either way. I'm merely pointing out that what we're here to do is to... Absolutely, and you wouldn't be any other way. Thank you. Steve, you were next, I believe.
Indeed, I will. Thanks, Chair. I'm always torn because you know full well that my role is to defend the green belt under any circumstances. However, the thing that bothers me isn't in this case the extension. It's the fact that there are a set of rules that have been set down that we're supposed to work to. And I agree with you that every application should be taken on its merits. But how many times do we hear what somebody else has done, so it gets thrown back in your face? Even though I agree with you totally, of course it's on its own merits, and therefore by stepping away from what the guidance is, you sort of set yourself up for the future. So I'm not, to be fair, I'm not minded one way or the other, but that's what I'm conscious of, rather than this particular application. It's the impact of it, and whether we like it or not, we don't make the rules, but the rules are the rules. And I think whenever you sort of go way outside of that, then you're setting yourself up for failure somewhere down the road. That would be my only comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So basically, if I understand it rightly, what you're saying is that on grounds of consistency, if we were to say yes to this application, then we shouldn't be too surprised to see similar applications come through expecting a similar outcome. Would that be effectively what you're saying? Okay, thank you. Do we have any further comments for debate, or do you wish to move on to the vote? Councillor Sisterson.
I suppose the only query, but I know the speaker's gone now. Why wasn't the previous planning, why wasn't that acted on? You know, so she was given permission for a smaller extension, and now has gone for the bigger one. I think it's, you know, maybe we should respect that was the rules that allowed that, and just follow that.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think to a point we have to disregard it because we've got to consider the application that's in front of us now. So you've purely got to focus on that, Councillor.
Okay, would you like to move on to the vote? Yeah? Okay, so the recommendation from the planning team is to refuse planning permission. All those in favour? In favour of refusing? Yeah. And all those against? Sorry, never remember to do this. Any abstentions? No. So the recommendation is rejected. Do excuse me while I have a quick check with my esteemed colleague. So having rejected that motion, I would like to ask if anybody has an alternative motion to put before the committee. Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to put an alternative for approval.
Thank you, Councillor.
I need that seconded, or did you want me to go into detail straight away?
I think we may have an intervention.
It's not so much an intervention, Chair. What and by all means, you can vote it's within the committee's gift. Based on what I've heard, I'm not clear from committee how they've considered the officer recommendation in terms of the VSC, the very special circumstances. So committee might be minded to discuss that. Alternatively, we could see if someone seconds Councillor Kelly's motion, but my recommendation would be that we bring the report back to committee with a follow-up in light of that. So a motion to, well, we'll see what your motion, if it's seconded first. But at the moment, I don't quite understand how you've addressed the officer's comments and recommendation, particularly if you look at the page 31, it is where I'd suggest you may wish to debate, councillors.
Councillor Kelly, did you have any thoughts on what grounds you would move to approve?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'm more than happy to go through that. So, first of all, obviously, it's important to understand as a planning committee, we are obviously well within our right to go against officer recommendations and make a decision based on its own merits. This is something that we have form on. I think, first of all, what is really important when we do make decisions like this is that we do look at previous similar decisions. What have we done in the past? Has there been any blowback on that? And I did raise earlier on that we have approved a Highview in Lower Dunton Road, which is absolutely huge compared to what we've been asked to do here today. And that was also the same with Orchard Cottage. So you have to understand from our perspective, we've approved schemes like this in the past. They get sent off to the Secretary of State and nothing ever comes back and says, you done bad there. So we have form in this. Second of all, what we're asking is that we allow these residents or developers to improve the property in what they're living in, because what they're currently living in is substandard based on modern standards. And quite frankly, the NPPF is clearly outdated. It's so outdated that the government is now panicking and is sent out to consultation. And officers, and you will see this later on in this agenda, the game has changed in the UK. And I can assure you, the scheme that we'll be looking at later on would not have been up for approval 12 months ago. So on that basis, I'm quite clear that we should be able to approve this. No one is complaining either. That's an important point. I think if the neighbours were kicking off, we're losing light, you know, that would be a problem. But there is no one here raising any concerns. So on that basis, and I'm happy to go into more detail if you want more detail, I see no reason whatsoever or anything in the past that we have done that suggests that what we've been asked to do here is unreasonable. I acknowledge and accept the officer recommendation that Officer Keane has come up with. If I was a planning officer, I'd come up with the same recommendation. I'm not a planning officer, I'm a councillor, and as a councillor, I'm allowed to look at these things a little bit more practically. On that basis, I think that it's perfectly reasonable to approve this scheme.
Thanks, Councillor. To be honest, I think I've got it. So you're moving to approve on the grounds that, one, grounds of consistency, that previous similar applications have been approved. Two, on the grounds of a requirement to bring the property up to reasonable standard of livability. Three, that there are no complaints. Just my suggestion, but that's more of a non-reason not to. So perhaps 1 and 2 would be.
Yeah, and we can
your,
add
your motion.
Yeah, and we can add conditions there to make sure that, I'm happy for Officer Keane to go back and make sure that things such as materials are standard, and if the officers want to go back and come back in a month's time with some conditions, like we have done previously, I'm more than happy to move with that. Thank you.
Okay. So the motion is to approve based on 1, principle of consistency, and 2, the need of the owners to bring the house up to current standard of living conditions. All those in favour? Oh, 2 seconds. Oh, sorry, we do need a seconder. I'm forgetting myself. Councillor Byrne. Thank you.
Can I invite my colleague Jonathan to just respond to any of the points that Councillor Kelly's raised before a vote's taken?
Thank you. Yeah, just to mention a couple of those points. So I accept the Highview, the application at Highview and Orchard Cottage were applications of a similar nature where officers had recommended refusal and committee overturned those. I think the Highview one went back to committee 2 or 3 times before the decision was issued. My colleague Nadia has pointed out there was a similar decision to this one at Linfields in Alsett Road from 2023, which was for a first floor side extension. That was recommended for refusal by officers. Refusal decision was issued, and the planning inspectorate did actually dismiss that decision on the basis of the extension being more than the 2 reasonably sized rooms. So we have had successive appeal on similar cases. So those would be my main comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate we're dodging about between motion and debate, so I am going to stick with the motion having been proposed and seconded, and I would like to ask who is in favour of that motion. Okay. So this is in favour of approving. You know, sometimes we're in favour of rejecting, in favour. This is in favour of approving, yes? Do you have every? Thank you very much. So the motion as proposed by Councillor Kelly and seconded by Councillor Byrne has been carried. We do have, thank you. We do have need conditions. Are we going to talk about those tonight? Or?
Okay, so I've had a chat with legal colleague. We're content that we don't need to bring this back on balance, but we will obviously need to draft conditions, so we can delegate authority to officers to draft conditions in consultation with Chair. So you'll need to vote on that, Chair.
Okay, so the proposal is to delegate authority to the planning team to come up with appropriate conditions. Do we need a proposer and seconder for that? I will propose it. Will anybody second it? Thank you, Councillor Polston. And all those in favour? Great. I'm doing it again. Okay, so we have agreed that we have agreed to approve the application and to delegate authority to the planning team to come up with an appropriate set of accommodation of conditions, which I think you will refer back to me.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And with that, our September meeting finishes. All that, and we've only finished September. I'd like to suggest a few minutes break, and then we will carry on being in the month that we're actually in.